Okay, so when we are working on like our daily multiple choice, right? Like you may work with a partner on this when you're doing this. There may be times where you have to define things, and I'm okay you pulling out your phone and defining like terminology and stuff like that in here. I'm okay with you doing that as we walk through. But I'm going to show you like how I expect these to look. Let's talk real quick. Like, what did you think about the passage overall?
I liked it a lot. I thought it was easy to memorize.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was fairly easy, even though it was older. I felt like it was easy. I felt like the syntax, like the sentence structure, wasn't too complicated. I think it's a good move into what you will see with Thoreau that we will start reading on Wednesday. I think Thoreau is similar syntax. I think it's more difficult to read because his ideas are a little bit loftier, a little bit more philosophical in nature. So I think it is a little bit more difficult. But I thought this one was easy. So remember, one of the things that we talk about is that when we're reading stuff like this, and like we're spending a couple of days, or we're probably going to spend this, we'll be doing this passage for like a week and a half. You can write this down as a piece of evidence, right? The autobiography of Benjamin Franklin can now become a piece of your evidence because you at least know enough about to talk about this section, right? In one portion of the autobiography by Benjamin Franklin, he discusses, right? So you can talk about it that way. All right, so let's first look at the question. When you look at the question, what do you first notice? Okay, so when I look at a question, I'm going to try to decide what category it falls in quickly, right? Like I don't want to take too much time doing this, but when you looked at your multiple choice breakdown, if you didn't cheat on the exam, you could say, okay, here's the category that I did the best in, and if a question falls in that category, you know, okay, like I should be able to get this one right? Like 85% of the time I've been getting this type of question correct. What question do you think this falls under? We're looking at rhetorical situation, claims and evidence, reasoning and organization, and style. What category do you think this one falls under? Rhetorical situation, right? Why? Because in rhetorical situation, we have to look at the purpose, the understand, and the do, right? That understand, do falls under rhetorical situation. So you can notice that's where it is. The other thing that I want you to notice is because it's the main purpose of the passage, it's whole passage. So, a couple of things that you can write down to remember. One, if it's a passage that you understood and you thought it was fairly easy to get the main idea of it, this question, if it's a whole main purpose question of the whole passage, it will come first. If you read the whole passage and you get the main idea of it, this should be easy to answer. Let's say you read the passage, and we've had them, where you don't really understand what the passage is talking about. What do you do with this question? Skip it. Why do you skip it? Well, you're not skipping it by yeah. So remember, our questions in the reading passage are chronological. So meaning that the other questions, after you answer them, are going to work chronologically through the passage. Meaning by the time you get done with that, you'll have a better understanding of what was happening so that then you can go back and answer this question correctly. I think out of the rhetorical situation questions, this one is a little bit more difficult to answer. Okay, so now that we looked at that, let's look at the answer choices. When you look at the answer choices, and I'm honestly asking you, what do you do first? What do you notice first?
I kind of noticed that each question is hard to describe, define, analyze, classify, and simulate.
Yeah, so I'm looking at, for this one, for this question, I'm looking at the verbs, right? Because sometimes the verbs will be able to allow us to categorize answer choices. Either they did do this or they did not do this. So it's one of the things that I want to look at. What else do you notice in the answer choices? Yeah. So we know that the purpose, because this is all the same, we know that this has something. to do with the purpose. Right? Because that's all the same. So friends, you see like the things that I'm writing down, what should you have written down? Your paper should look like my paper. That's how you'll be graded. Okay, so now let's go through and let's talk about each one. So A, argue for the impossibility of arriving at moral perfection. Is it right or wrong? What makes it wrong? Okay, so the impossibility, this part, makes it wrong. Because he actually talks about how to arrive at it, and what does he do that? Where does he do that? It's the list, right? Yeah. I mean, paragraph 2 leads into that, right? So that happens in the list. I had somebody else say that, like, argue made it wrong. And I'm going to tell you, like, everything we read is going to be an argument on something. Even the drafts and revising and editing will be an argument on something. So he does, like, take a position. So for that reason, this is going to be wrong. B, describe the writer's planned process of arriving at moral perfection. Is it right or is it wrong? Okay, we're going to put that in there. Why? Yeah, the planned process is the list. And you know I loved that part because when he explained the list, we do this first because this reason. Second comes after this because you have to have this before you have that, right? Like that. I like that part. And does he describe each part of the process? Yes, he does. So not just because he did this, we have to make sure the verb, he did the verb and this, right? So that one we would put a check by. C, define the concept of arriving at moral perfection. What do you mean? He doesn't define anything in there?
He does in the first paragraph.
He does in every one of the lists, right? Like every item. So he does define the concept of arriving, like what is concept? Like that's that like umbrella, that big overreaching idea.
I'd say it was wrong because it's autobiographical, so defining a concept would be like for other people in his.
I mean, like defining a concept, each one of us have our own way of defining it. So is he defining it? Yeah. What makes this wrong? There we go. Yeah. This is true, and he does it, but it's not the purpose. Defining a concept is just the understand part, right? But not the do part. So it's not his true purpose. He must first define it in order to make us do something, right? So I would label this as the distractor. Now remember, and I think this one's a little bit easier, because I think the passage was easier, I think this question is easier. But remember, there might be 2 correct answers. We just have to look at why one is more correct than the other. So let's look at D. Is D correct or incorrect?
Incorrect.
Why?
Is it giving effects?
Yeah, there's no discussion or analysis of the effects. Now maybe later in his autobiography he covers that, but in the passage that we read, there is no conversation about effects of what happens after moral perfection is achieved. E, classify the ways of arriving at moral perfection. Correct or incorrect? Do what? It's his way.
Well, like when you said ways, is that the wrong word?
I think ways that would be the list, right? So the ways to moral perfection is by doing all those lists. So what makes this answer choice wrong? What does classify mean?
Like there.
No.
Like you said, some
Different what?
other ways of
Groups. To classify means to like put in groups. Y'all are classified as juniors. So what are the groups? Freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. So does the list count as classified? Time to wake up. Does classify count as, like, does the 1 through 13 count as a group? Are those grouped? No, they're listed. Now if he said the first 4 can be grouped as this, the next 4 can be grouped as this, that would be classifying. Listing and classifying are 2 different verbs, right? So then your correct answer is, so this is what I should see on each one that we're going through. You won't have time to do this like on the day of the exam, but like you could do your marks on the outside and mark why things are wrong, right? So when you go back, this is what I expect to see when we're doing this on the day, right? Now, this took us like 10 minutes to do. It shouldn't take me longer than about 2 minutes to talk about because y'all should already have this done. When you come in, sit down, just take a couple of minutes for you to do. You may work with a partner, and then we'll talk through the answer. So some will take longer than the other if they're more difficult questions, but it shouldn't take us more than a couple of minutes. Good? All right, that needs to go in your notebook for me, please.